Hi everyone, I'm Tamara Lawler. Boy, did I learn a lot during this practicum experience based on what I had thought I had read in research and what I experienced with 6th and 7th grade sheltered English students in history and ELA. So I'm Tamara Lawler and I'm going to show you the next slide. Okay, so here we go. Ventura, California, the demographics in Ventura, California were just about 45 minutes below the upper end of Santa Barbara, and we're about 45 minutes north of the northernmost point of Los Angeles. So because of our coastal location, our rural, we have quite a bit of agriculture, even though we're on the coast. About 50% of our city is Caucasian and 50% is Latino. Of the Latino, a strong percentage, up to 84%, their first language is Spanish, but their second language they've been speaking all their life is in English, but not necessarily literate in Spanish. In fact, most are not. The city comprises of 105,856 people. The neighboring cities for us, we are known most for citrus agriculture. All right. De Anza Middle School, it's also known as DATA. It's an acronym for De Anza Technology of Arts because they were given quite a big grant for their sheltered English population students to use technology. I will say that 99% of every classroom is using technology the entire time. The students have Chromebooks, and this is a picture of the middle school. There are 888 students this year enrolled at DATA, and the students are on Chromebooks about 99%. 26% of the population is Caucasian. 74% of the student population is Latino. The community speaks both English and Spanish. Biliteracy, mostly it's monoliteracy in English. So a little bit about me. I'm a volunteer at DATA. I don't normally work there. I was invited in because my son's godfather is the principal there at DATA, and the cooperating teacher and I just happened to also go to high school together, so that was a fun connection that we learned later. She has a Doctor of Education and a CLAD credential, but she does not speak any Spanish with her students, and we had 44 students altogether between our two classes. Each class meets with her for both first and second period, the 6th grade sheltered, and then 5th and 6th period, so we get them each for 2 hours for the 7th sheltered English and history classes. This year, due to COVID, the students were at a hardship because they had not been in full instruction with teachers since 3rd or 4th grade. So this was quite a transition back because of COVID. So my plan or my focus for instruction for the 6th and 7th grade sheltered students was that the students have been speaking English, if not all of their lives, most of their lives. So no ELD instruction was needed for the students. However, we did need some various literacy interventions because all of the students have tested 3 grades below their reading and writing level, or their reading and writing levels 3 grades below their actual grade level. And so that became my focus very quickly, that I did not need to do instruction in English, but I did need to do serious literacy instruction. When I first started, all of my literature and research that I had been reading talked about focusing on biliteracy so that it can support both literacies, but also their L2 literacy. And what I found was, since I'm only with them 7 or 8 weeks, and the students were extremely resistant because they have been given no instruction previously in Spanish, that asking my students to write their letters in both English and Spanish, that was my focus for their writing portfolio while they had me, was to write advice letters to a local elementary school that also has a significant sheltered English population, and they were to write them letters of advice on how to be successful in middle school. They were reluctant enough to write in general, but then the thought of having to write in Spanish on top of it really upset them. So quickly, I had a conversation with Amy Marcos, Dr. Amy Marcos, and she helped me realize that that was not a realistic expectation for me and to change my focus with my students. So quickly, my first plan of instruction was in their writing portfolios, having them write those letters of advice to the 5th grade students locally. And we would do several drafts that would be meaningful to what they needed to study next in their writing, acquiring more writing strength. And then in their reading, they have history and ELA textbooks. And we created bookmarks that are 10 reading strategies that good readers do. And they practiced all 10 strategies in each of their texts. And then we focused and reflected on which ones were most successful for them, depending on which type of reading material they were doing. All right. So next are my learning goals. Make sure I didn't pass. Oh, okay. The scholarship for which I based my lessons focus were on 2 texts. The first text was When English Language Learners Write by Catherine Davy Samway, and the other one was Reading, Writing, and Learning in ESL by Suzanne Paragoy and Owen Boyle. Okay, so some of the things that shaped my focuses the most, or my foci the most, was reading and writing is a social act whenever there is an author and an audience. In a symbiotic relationship, writers take into consideration the needs of their readers, and readers take into account the author's intentions. So having the students write to peers or someone that they feel they have something meaningful to share, like 5th grade students, and then being excited to receive a letter back from these students, I felt really made it genuine and authentic what we were doing, and helped them to be engaged in making sure that their writing wasn't just for a teacher, but for a peer, and it was strong writing. Also, another scholarship was, it isn't enough to give ELLs time to write. There also needs to be time for focused instruction that is grounded in the needs of learners. That is, teachers' needs to observe carefully and engage with each writer, teaching according to observed needs. So that was Samway, page 178. And then for reading, some of the things that shaped my focus were also to have a buddy log and reading journals that show the value and how to perform reading responses and strategies effectively. And Paragoy and Boyle had that on page 313 and 14. And then the frequency of similarities found in students' writing when they wrote in their native language and their non-native language demonstrated a need for scaffolded instruction in both. So that was what shaped me early on, and then I started changing my foci, or my focus. And then in the passages from Reading and Writing and Learning in ESL, that book from Catherine Davy Samway, she shared there are 6 traits of good writing in a chart with ideas, and clarifying students' purposes for writing, organization, voice, word choice, sentence fluency, and writing conventions. So within that, and that was on page 297, was this amazing chart, and one of them was peer response groups. And you'll see along the way that I did these oral peer response groups with about 4 or 5 students in a group and me to model the behavior and give them a printout of good quality questions to ask the writer as they're responding to their letters. And that came out of that. And then there was a significant area on portfolio assessment that we're going to do next week with the students to have them reflect on their reading strategies and their writing strategies and what SMART goals they want to make for growth after I'm gone. So those were the literacies. And then from there, we had some learning goals for the Sheltered History and ELA 6th and 7th grade students. These are them working hard in their groups. And so my goals with them were hoping that the strategies for reading and writing that benefit ELL students with the bookmark reading strategies and with scaffolding specific peer editing groups as they're writing their letters, that they would grow in the ability to write. For example, when we first started writing a brainstorm the very first day, students had a hard time coming up with 3 sentences. Most of the students wrote 1 to 2 sentences. By the end of our project, every student had at least 3 paragraphs, some 4 or 5. Every student had specific ideas, and we kept asking the question, so what? When they would tell them a tip like, opening your lockers can be embarrassing in the PE room, I asked them to ask themselves, so what? And then from there, they had to answer, so, because you have to change in front of others, you might want to get a locker near a friend. And so they got very specific in their advice and their letters. Same with the bookmark reading strategies. They had laminated bookmarks, and they would go through each strategy and work with another partner and discuss how that strategy could be used to the text we were reading, pull out a quote, and attempt to make an inference or a prediction or summarize. And what I found was that these got very challenging because some of the summaries were more like themes where they were, 5 or 6 words or a sentence, but not really a summary. So we had to model and scaffold quite a bit more with their reading strategies. And ultimately, my other learning goal, which I was not successful at, was to work with them in both of their literacies. And that actually did not end up taking place. Okay, so bookmark reading strategies and oral peer response with instructors are effective. That's what I learned, that they are effective. In fact, I was shocked at how effective the oral, I had done written peer editing before and swapping papers with partners, and we did plenty of that. But this was oral peer response groups, and we modeled it with me in the group, and then they had handouts that showed them good quality questions to ask. And I couldn't believe how valuable every person's input on the writer's reading, listening, and writing down notes and deciding for him or herself whether they were going to take that advice or if it was an effective advice for them, really empowered the writer and made even the readers want to give better advice the next time. So I loved that, and I learned that. What I also learned was that biliteracy in just 7 weeks is not effective, nor is it possible. And yes, I met my goals except for working in biliteracy. This is some evidence of a student in his journey with his letter, and you can see that he only has a couple of paragraphs, but it's way more than what he started with. Look at all the yellow. The yellow are the peer response groups and the places where he was to take notes on things that people were giving him advice on, mostly on content at this point, and not a lot of editing on capitalization and punctuation. And then we kept going from there after they had their content fully developed. Lastly, again, what I learned is that peer oral response groups are extremely helpful. Biliteracy teaching for multilingual learners in a short period of time when they've had no previous instruction in their L1 is not possible. And then the bookmark good reading strategies are effective, but need to be scaffolded, some more than others. For example, when students had to make a connection or ask a question, they did that very easily with almost no scaffolding. But later, when we had to talk about predictions or inferencing, that was much, much more difficult and needed a lot more scaffolding. So I hope this is beneficial to everyone, and I thank you all for listening to my presentation. Joyce.